Welcome to Registered, the podcast of the Catholic Register, where we'll be taking a look at the stories that graced all of our platforms over the past week. I'm Mickey Conlon, editor of the Register, alongside associate editor Quinton Amundson and reporter Luke Mandato. This episode is brought to you by Full of Grace, which has in production the major film titled All for Her, based on the life of Father Patrick Peyton. His worldwide rosary crusades were initiated in Canada with the famous slogan, "The family that prays together stays together." Visit fullofgraceproductions.ca for more details. So much went on this week. We had so much, in fact, that we had a hard time deciding which story was going to be our cover story this week. So it came down to, at the time, we couldn't turn around without being hit on the head with the situation in Iran and the unrest which is looking to unseat the Ayatollah and the Islamic regime there. The one thing, though, that we've found from looking into this, kind of buried in the news and around the unrest, is a bit of a little-known fact: the rise of Christianity in this bastion of Islam. Quinton, you had a chance to speak to a couple of people, Christian people in Canada from the Iranian community. Why don't you tell us what you found out from those conversations?
Thank you, Mickey. We, of course, have found out that many of the watchdogs that examine Christian persecution, and even the Crown Prince of Iran, have said that Christianity is really flowing. So we wanted to get that personal dimension. So I did speak to Father Pastor Amir from the Emmanuel Church in Richmond Hill, and he really gave a good broad overview about how it's persecution and some of the bigger overlying factors. But I was really struck by the personal testimony of a woman named Miriam out of Calgary. She came with her family 8 years ago out of Iran. First, for 4 years, they fled to Turkey to escape from the persecution for their Christian beliefs, and then they were able to get a refugee sponsorship to Calgary. And Miriam was this very full of faith, and she said that, for many years she tried to read the Quran, was very dutiful in trying to understand, but she never got the love and the generosity and the serenity that really felt right in her heart. She found a Bible, very hard to do because it's pretty much outlawed in Iran, at a brother-in-law's house, and then she opened it and she fell in love with Christ and his message about wanting to have a relationship through love of God and love of your fellow man. And she was just completely hooked. She passed it along to her family. They got involved in the underground church. But unfortunately, the intimidation and the threats got so loud with her and her family that for the sake of their 2 daughters, they made the difficult choice to leave everything behind and go away. So, I think that's a very powerful, observation that she made, and I wanted to make note of, is that as much as the regime has tried to censor the Bible, it just has actually created more of an intrigue. It's kind of like this forbidden piece of fruit that you really want to be like, okay, if they're working so hard to ban this thing, I got to take a look and see what they don't want me to see. And Miriam did it, and she has never looked back. I was really inspired by listening to her story of faith.
Yeah, I guess that it comes as a bit of a surprise that I've been reading in other articles that Christianity is kind of part of the protests. Has helped build it up. I don't know how much that's the case. But obviously, it looks like there is some rise in Christianity in Iran, which, as I said, is a surprise. Luke, what some of your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think a really compelling part of that story, Quinn, is that idea of when something is censored, when something is hushed and pushed to the side or silenced, you're not necessarily, that doesn't automatically make the case that the subject matter at hand is something to be wary of. It actually kind of does the opposite, which you alluded to there. The fact that they felt like, the pushback was so strong that they had to see almost what the hype was about, for lack of a better word. And it reminds me of a quote. When you tear out a man's tongue, you are not proving him to be a liar. You're only telling the world that you fear what he might say. And I think that's George R.R. Martin, whose quote that is. But it's just such an interesting thing to hear. We've heard it in stories of other persecuted Christians around the world where, if you can go as far back into history about the persecution of Christians, these are people that aren't being persecuted for no reason. They wouldn't be persecuted if it was known to be a lie or if it was known to be nonsense. It's obvious that even the powers that be that are opposed to the faith understand that there is a power there and there is a draw there. And that's something I think we see very clearly in Miriam's story, for sure.
It's somewhat biblical there too, going back to the days of Christ. Well, we got to silence this guy. He's speaking the truth. Well, and
I also took note of, Mickey, that her husband, his name is Joseph. Joseph and Miriam, what did they have to do? They had to flee to have their faith. And I was just, I thought about that a few minutes after the call. I was like, oh, how fitting is that, it's Miriam and Joseph. You just take out the EM at the end, and it's just, it was great. I guess I want to touch on one thing that you said about maybe why it's contributing to the ongoing protests that are happening. And Pastor Amir said that people who have fled the country, they are going to places around the world that have religious liberty, and they're really able to celebrate Christ fully and freely. And they are passing along, the wonder of their religion back to their relatives in Iran. And I wouldn't be surprised if this desire for freedom is being inspired by just the reverberations coming from the diaspora, with the messages that they're transmitting back to the country. I mean, it's very complicated what's really inspiring what's going on the ground these past few weeks, but I'm sure a very strong underlying factor not getting a lot of attention is this thirst for freedom, because Miriam said, when you have freedom, you find Christ. And I think that's all that needs to be said.
Yeah. Well, you also have to look at it. It's an Islamic regime, but let's not kid ourselves. It's not Islam that's oppressing the people and making them that they can't afford to live, basically. It's the people in charge and their interpretation of Islam that is making this happen. So, it's so often you hear, oh, religion is the cause of all these problems. And it's like, well, no, it's the people interpreting that religion that is causing the problems. So, just some food for thought. So, well, we're going to stick to this geopolitical realm because it's not just Iran that's been on our radar. And since we put the paper to bed, of course, Greenland and Donald Trump's wanting to take it over is basically filling all the papers, all the newscasts and that. So, and Donald Trump, as he's inclined to do, he's taking up all of that air that the media breathes. So, a number of things on his plate, of course, include Iran. He's threatened to strike Iran if protesters are killed, which, of course, he's backed off on for now. Things are still stirring because of Trump's ordered attacks on Venezuela and the arrest of the Maduros. But obviously, with upping the ante on his pledge to take Greenland one way or the other, the world has taken notice. And I know, Quinton, as you said, there is a bit of a deal. It seems to be, and we don't know the details, but and Trump himself has said, no, I'm not going to invade. So, but Trump being Trump. So, all that said, it's led to some response from 3 American Cardinals, and good on these Cardinals, Kupik, McElroy, and Tobin, who released a statement calling for a genuinely moral U.S. foreign policy. We do see a dilemma here, though. In the first two we talked about, Iran and Venezuela, well, I don't think there's too many people that were worried that if Trump does launch any strikes on Iran, hey, that was kind of moral, some people will say. Venezuela, same thing. And we know that our comrade at work, Oscar Para, just came back from Colombia and spoke with a lot of people, a lot of Venezuelans from down there, and they're totally in support of Trump and what he did. But in Greenland, the world is like hands off, you know. But so there's the dilemma when it comes to a foreign policy. What's genuinely moral? Any thoughts?
It's such a very difficult question. I think there needs to just continue to be dialogue. I think it was just very appropriate that the conference chair of the bishops in the United States did meet with Donald Trump in the Oval Office 10 days ago for a discussion about mutual areas of concern and potential path for partnership going forward. And I mean, that's going to be, something that we'll have to see if, both sides are willing to hear each other out in the various perspectives. But it does seem like there is a lot of desire for bishops to speak up. And I did see reports later in 2025 that Pope Leo is encouraging, the bishops to use their voice, on areas of national concern. We have to really see if this dialogue could just be furthered, because it's so complicated, just how nimble and how quickly moves are being made by various powers. And if there's a way to do it in a moral way, I hopefully they could find that way through further discussion.
I think the other thing too, Mickey, that you touched on there is the question of why Greenland. And I think people want some sort of consistency when we look at different areas that are being looked at, right? So I understand that the message that went out may be just when we're looking at, Catholic just principles, but you have to wonder why it hasn't been more selective as well when we look at Venezuela and other places, right? We have to see, is there a risk of oversimplifying some of these complex geopolitical realities? Is there a one-size-fits-all answer to all the different things that Donald Trump says each week of what he's going to do and what he's thinking of doing? And then I think it begs the question, and I'd like to hear what you think, Mickey, as well. Why is it that the public, I guess, at large seems to just have this air of caution about it when Greenland becomes the driving topic as opposed to some of the other places that have been discussed? I really don't know.
I guess, all these other places have got real standing armies, and they're, you almost, and I hope this doesn't sound bad, but you almost look at Greenland, that's barely even a real country. As Trump himself says, oh, we want that piece of ice. But, we know that's not true. Apparently there's 57,000 people who live in Greenland, but Greenland's a threat to absolutely no one in the world. And I guess it's this going after the weakest is, it's the big bully, trotting on the really small guy that's probably what has, as much as anything, has caused the outrage. So,
it's like he's playing four-dimensional chess in his mind, and I don't think other people can really see what the end goal is. They see why Greenland, it seems, like you said, so minuscule. There's obviously something that he's been thinking about. I think Quinton might have some insight into that, maybe.
Well, all I'll say is that I think one of the key things that came out of that bishops' meeting with Trump in the White House and Marco Rubio and J.D. Vance is the bishops pretty much raised something that we spoke about on a recent podcast, when it came to the future in Venezuela about, hey, the Venezuelan people, those are the people that live there. I think they have to have a right to decide their future. And I imagine they'll the bishops probably feel the same thing with the people in Greenland. Yes, much lower population base, but there are people that are living there, and they want to have an idea of who's going to be having some sovereignty in various pockets of land.
Well, because you say that, and who's Trump having talks with? Denmark. He's not having talks with anyone in Greenland about any of this. So, of course, it's Greenland being a protectorate or so of Denmark. So, but we'll see what happens. Apparently, that deal is in place. I'm sure in the next few days we'll find out more and more about it, and be sure to tune in. There's some more craziness coming out of it, so we will just see. What isn't crazy, though, is when we're coming back home here, if Christianity is going to be growing in an unlikely place like Iran, where it may not be so welcome, hey, how about back here? Things are looking up. I know each of you have done stories on strengthening of faith, particularly among our youth, which leads us to Luke. In your story, you had a chance to speak with Randy Boyagoda, a professor and former vice president of Toronto's University of St. Michael's College. He wrote a recent column under the title, "Catholicism is Cool Again." But there's a bit of a twist to that. Luke, you can explain.
Yeah, it was a very interesting conversation. And I think indirectly it sort of builds on this general feeling that we've been reporting on for a while now about the rise in interest in Catholicism, both in little pockets, whether it's young men or, Gen Z population, but also just society as a whole through media and all these different things. So, yeah, Randy took a look at this in his opinion column, basically sort of highlighting this feeling that he's been having and that I guess society at large has been having about Catholicism holding this sort of cachet now in the modern day, more so than it has in previous years. He looked at people like Prime Minister Mark Carney and the United States' J.D. Vance, their public witness to the Catholic faith in the media, things like culture and art, Martin Scorsese's The Saints, films like Conclave and Immaculate, fashion trends that lean towards a more like modest and traditional Catholic look that have been popping up, especially in the United States. And of course, the election of Pope Leo last year really dominated the mainstream headlines. So throughout all these things, there's this sense that Catholicism is becoming a bit more openly acceptable in the mainstream, popular, cool, whatever word you want to call it. But the real interest in the conversation and the real interest of the article of my conversation with him is the question of whether that resulting coolness is something that is a shining moment, if it's something we should look at and be curious about and not, overly invested in. One of the things he said is he wanted to be clear that the opinion was not a triumphant moment for Catholicism. He said, well, there is a certain cachet and popularity right now. He thinks it would be dangerous and irresponsible to pretend that it's like we're on the upswing in a certain way.
He's worried that Catholicism's a fad. And of course, we know fads in this day and age, they last about a minute and a half and then they're out the door. What's next?
That's exactly his thought, right? So it's a weird dichotomy between the longest, most permanent, most beautiful tradition and religion and faith in all of history being looked at in a way that it could be something that, society forgets about because they're done with it and they've wrung it out and it's not cool anymore and they got the film money and all this, right? So it was a very interesting talk. And I asked him, can something be cool and cachet if the kids aren't doing it? And he said that's something we don't even really have to worry about. He talked about the vibe shift of young men, especially looking for that traditional source of identity and belonging. And he's saying, well, there's nothing more traditional and having a sense of identity and belonging than the Catholic Church. So who knows? Maybe it is something that sticks. Maybe we are on the upswing. We've done, I don't know, Mickey, we've done countless stories on young people finding their way back to the church, but who knows? Maybe it's something that the media is taking a little bit of advantage of while they still can, right?
Well, it's been 2,000 years since the start of the church. I'm sure there's been ups and downs over those 2,000 years, but certainly got some staying power. We're still here.
We're on a podcast right now. Take a look at that. Who would have thought?
Yes, I'm sure. So, well, if we're going to talk about the cool factor, well, this more so about Christianity. It's you're seeing it in the media, and in particular, I know Quinton, you've been writing quite a bit recently about some of the faith-based films. And of course, the one you wrote about this week, I Can Only Imagine 2, which is the sequel to, guess what? I Can Only Imagine. So tell us about your conversation with the people there.
Yeah, thanks, Mickey. Yeah, Alex Kendrick is one of the group of filmmakers over the last 7 years leading this renaissance of Catholic filmmaking, and we are seeing the underserved faith population finally getting what they need from the big screen entertainment. I mean, I Could Only Imagine, Jesus Revolution, the two animated films last year, King of Kings and David, both broke the record that stood for 27 years for box office opening from The Prince of Egypt. So there is people looking for this authenticity and this reverence. And finally, the faith-based filmmakers are giving them what they need in terms of giving them that, biblically faithful entertainment, but also with the cinematic wonder. Even people that do not like the faith-based films are saying, wow, the animation is absolutely incredible. Filmmakers are upping their game. But this is a live action story, a sequel to, the life of Bart Millard, who wrote the best-selling Christian single of all time, I Can Only Imagine. It's a beautiful story about how, unlike the first one where we learned how he had to forgive his father and have a really good cathartic bond late in life because the father found Christ. Formerly, he was abusive. Now in this one, Bart, who is the front man of Mercy Me, is trying to be the father that he never really had when he was young, and the difficult things because of the son's lifelong battle with diabetes and the despair that it could cause a father. So it's supposedly going to be a very beautiful film. I love the fact that it took 6 years to approve the development of this film. This wasn't a soulless cash grab, like, oh wow, it got 86 million to the domestic office, let's just rush a sequel into production. They waited for a story to emerge, and apparently it's going to be better than the first. And I loved what the director Alex Kendrick said. He was so faithful that he pretty much said, well, to the lead actor J. Michael Finley, either you're doing this film or I'm going to kidnap you and you're doing this film. So he was very colorful about getting everybody on board to tell the story, and I think people are going to rush to see it when it comes out on February 20th.
Well, another factor in that, you're seeing some of the name actors and actresses that are taking part in these films. Dennis Quaid plays the father in this one. The Jesus Revolution, we had Kelsey Grammer. Now those they're Hollywood big hitters. They may not be in the big blockbusters that they've been in the past, but they're not shying away. It's nice to see. But, it's not just the big films that are getting those words out there and getting the message. So, Luke, you did a story about the Real Justice Film Festival out of the Diocese of Hamilton, and with Development and Peace, Caritas Canada are involved in that. The ninth year is this year's festival. So tell us what you've learned.
Yeah, it's definitely not just the big films. This is an initiative that, like you said, is approaching its 10th anniversary next year between the Diocese of Hamilton's Library Office and Development and Peace, Caritas Canada. Essentially what it is it's a film festival where each month they take a look at a different documentary or short film. Ones you're probably not going to find on the big screen in the theater, but nonetheless with great subject matter. So it's cool to see that, Catholicism and Christianity, films and media doesn't necessarily have to be a saint or a priest on the screen. it can tackle some of the issues that are important to us as well. So it started out rather, I guess, on the 22nd with a film on housing insecurity. There's going to be one on intellectual freedoms. They always do something with Indigenous rights. They do a kids screening for something more appropriate to their age level. I believe there's one on ecological debt and mining. They've gone online in the past few years. I think out of COVID, they switched it to online screenings. So anyone that's interested can sign up. There's different dates for each movie. I believe they run one per month until about May. You can log on. You can discuss the films with people around you. And they also bring in some guest speakers for each film through the presentation online to sort of highlight some of the next steps or initiatives or actions you can take for these different social justice initiatives. So it was just interesting. I think I had written about this a few years ago, and it's just interesting to see how it's evolved. They said their numbers are going up. The online thing has really been working for them. So, you don't have to go into the cinema to be met with a Christian film or something that is important to your faith, and something that can maybe push you to look at next steps and how you can do your best to approach those social issues in your own way.
Okay, well, thank you for that, guys. That'll bring this episode of Registered to a close this week. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. We'd also like to thank our sponsor, Full of Grace, which has in production the major film titled All for Her, based on the life of Father Patrick Peyton. His worldwide rosary crusades were initiated in Canada with the famous slogan, "The family that prays together stays together." Visit fullofgraceproductions.ca for more details. And as always, we welcome you to tune in for all the Catholic news at our website at catholicregister.org. So again, thanks very much for joining us, and we hope you will join us again next week.